meeting to order for the Leesburg City Commission for the budget workshop, July 7th. Time is 5:30. Is it 6 or 7? Oh, July 6th. If you please rise for the invocation and the pledge. Our Heavenly Father, bless all of us here tonight. Keep us healthy and safe. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The first item on the agenda, which is number 2, it's actually the only item on the agenda, is presentations, and I'll turn that over to the city manager.
All right. Commissioner, thank you. Is that on? I think I'm on. Until somebody yells at me, I'm going to assume I'm on. So this evening, again, we're back in budget time to do our annual workshops. I think pretty much everybody's familiar with the situation or the process rather. We will review. We have 3 budget workshops scheduled for obviously this evening. We have our regular meeting on Monday, and then we beat you up next week with 3 meetings. So we have the second budget workshop on Tuesday, 5:30 again in this facility. On Tuesday, we'll take a look at the special revenues and the electric and gas departments. And then on Thursday, we finish off with the rest of the enterprise funds, water, sewer, airport, solid waste, stormwater, and then we take a look at kind of the housekeeping funds like the pension fund and the inter-service funds, which are pretty much housekeeping and transfer type funds. Tonight is, as we do, we always started off with the general fund, so we'll get right into that. The general fund consists of all those general services, the city commission budget, public outreach, administration, city clerk, city attorney, human resources, planning and zoning, recreation. The public works functions would be streets and park maintenance and these type of things. Police and fire, of course, the lion's share of the general fund. We'll start off with a summary of where the proposed budget that you have before you is. And I think kind of in one quick simple statement of where the general fund is at this year versus other years is the general fund was actually relatively easy to balance this year because of the big tax change we'll talk about, where the enterprise funds got a little bit more difficult. And if I was going to give an explanation to that, I think it's because we have kind of leveraged the enterprise funds to get general fund growth. And this year, the big change in the general fund is the significant growth that we got, which was non-villages related. So we'll talk about that later, which really opens up kind of, I think we need to take a snapshot forward to look at fiscal year 25, and we'll do that real quick. So again, most of the things in the general fund stay pretty much the same. There's a few deviations in there. There's some additional maintenance items with some additional maintenance for the Venetian gardens and those type of areas, but pretty much the same, and we'll hit those as we go department by department. So we start out kind of just some high-level stuff, the big stuff, and then we'll break it down and do the department by department in the general fund, and then answer any questions, get some direction from you. And then at the end, we would like kind of to formulate the DR 420. So it's, most of you probably you know all this, but couple of new commissioners. So the 2 ways that we set up. So we had the resolution that we passed, I guess that was about a meeting or 2 ago, where we passed the potential fire assessment fee resolution of $165. So that will go on the trim notice in August. Then by the end of this month, we have to submit the DR 420. That's the real fancy word for the term that the form that we submit to the tax collector to prepare the trim notices has to be there by the end of July. That is your maximum millage rate without doing your own advertising for the trim notice. So those two items go on the trim notice with all the other taxing jurisdictions. And then the trim notices go out in August, which shows the public your maximum taxes. And then we come back in September and approve the millage rate and the budget with two resolutions. We read the resolution twice. Okay, so without further ado, the first thing that's of significance to the fiscal year 24 proposed budget is kind of a significant change in taxing policy. We've talked about this a lot, so I won't beat the dead drum. When we get to some charts, I'll show you maybe some other things you want to consider. But moving into the proposed budget, we decrease significantly the ad valorem millage rate from 4.192 mils to the proposed budget of 3.4245 mils. That reduction makes up for the next thing, which is the fire assessment rates. We are recommending that you double. So on an ERU, equivalent residential unit basis, they would go from $87 a year to $165 a year. And on the commercial, industrial, warehouse, institutional, whatever you pay, whether it's $5,000 or $20,000, that number would double. What this does is three things. One, it brings in the additional revenue, $1.2 million. It also gets our fire fees to where they're isolated to an assessment versus the millage. That allows new millage rates to come in and not have to go towards fire services. So that's kind of a liberating, good philosophy for taxing. And then we eliminate the differential in when the new village residents are with us versus existing city residents, which we think is really important, so that everybody in Leesburg pays the same rate, whether you have villages fire services through their district or City of Leesburg fire services. No matter where you are, that number will be the same. And not only do we do those four things, the last bullet, we still, that 165 number is still very competitive in our region. Most municipalities collect somewhere around the 80 to 90% of potential fire assessment fees and have a fire assessment fee somewhere around $200 a year. So we're still a little bit low on maximum capture and still a little bit low on annual total. So at a 3.4 millage rate and $165 ERU for fire assessment fees, we're still a relatively low taxing assessment municipal corporation. The next big thing that we did in the budget, and we already implemented it on 6/12, which was the pay increase plan. So we got all the pay starting salary up to $15 an hour. We had the formulaic approach to how we address compression. We increased police officer pay so that the starting pay would be just a tick over $60,000, and that existing officers with more than 1 month but less than a year of service, they get $60,300. So we don't have a compression issue there. Then all other officers receive 16%. Firefighters got a 5% increase. That we increased the paramedic incentive pay, but we also gave them time worked for a total increase that we estimated around 7%. Those salary increases pursuant to your direction and the resolution you passed went into effect 7/1. So the employees will receive the benefits of the fiscal year 24 in the last quarter of 23, and then we'll reconsider COLAs and merit raises again for next fiscal year, which would be 10/1/24 or fiscal year 25. A couple other things of interest to note as highlights. Last year, we did kind of a switch with workers' comp and health insurance. We robbed some money from the workers' comp fund to stabilize the health insurance fund. So that worked out really well because by all indications, whenever you say something, so it goes the other way. But so far to date, the health insurance fund is hanging in there, so we don't have any major increases there. But the bad side of the equation is our worker comp claims are way up this year for various different reasons. So when we increase that by 50%, our total across the board work comp charges that we did to ourselves was half of that 1.2 million, so it was about 680,000. So we increased that to replenish the cash, but not only do we need to replenish the cash now we're kind of paying some higher insurance claim costs on that. So we kept it the work comp rate at that 50% higher rate, which is a $1.2 million total cost that we're throwing into the work comp fund. And general fund roughly pays probably around 65% of that number. That's why we throw this in the general fund, and we'll talk about the specific numbers on Thursday next when we do that special fund. Property liability and auto insurance, so general liability insurance, we are seeing an increase there. Is about 38%, or about 407,000. We shifted, and we talked about this a little bit during the pay increase, but we're proposing to take money from the Carver Heights CRA, transfer it back to the general fund to have 3 designated officers that will work just the Carver Heights CRA area to help with safety concerns and those type of things. I really see this kind of as a bridge the gap type of action. Right? The 2 things that the police department is struggling with in fighting crime is the low pay, which hurt recruiting, and then just standard operating procedures and different stuff. So we have a low amount of officers budgeted to begin with, but then we have significant vacancies. So we felt like to increase that, we needed to increase the pay as we had those areas, but then also we had the concern about safety in the Carver Heights area. So using that CRA money as an eligible expense, and I think as your property taxes start to rise with new revenue, which we'll talk about in a little bit, then you start feeding that money back to the CRA for other things. So it's kind of more of a sustainability and an immediate reaction to try to get more public safety. Next thing, which kind of a good news thing, we're keeping the fleet lease at 75%. Most of you know fleet lease. Commissioner Berry, I know, and Commissioner Reisman knew. So fleet lease is another one of those items where we charge ourselves for all the vehicles we purchase. So every new car, I'm going to use an easy number. Every new car, say, is $10,000. I wish, right, that a car cost 10 grand. So, but then we depreciate that number over the value of the car. So 10 years, $2 grand. So whatever department bought that $10,000 car, they have to pay $2,000 lease payment to the fleet fund, and then that generates the monies that we purchase new equipment from. So the fleet lease is the fund. We'll talk about that more in detail. That's always a significant hit on the budget. We generate about $1.5 million with the fleet lease at 75%. 75% comes from going on 10 budget years ago now, when we were contributing into the fleet fund at X. We reduced that number to try to shrink the fleet and save money, and then we always thought there would be a time where we'd be back at what we called 100%, which 10 years ago, but we're still back at 75%, so we still haven't gone back to that number. And the fleet bottom line is hanging on. We'll talk about that Tuesday. But that's always an important note to do. Another little bit of a change in the general fund, which actually falls into the commission budget, was a change in the holiday program for the employees. So a little bit more of a benefit. Kind of came back from the COVID times. Historically, we have had a holiday luncheon for the employees. It costs about 10 grand-ish or so to put that on. Everybody comes in at lunchtime. We have a big spread, and then we do a raffle, and folks get door prizes. I think everybody appreciates that luncheon, but when we had the COVID issue a couple years ago, we canceled the luncheon, and we gave everybody a $100 gift card. I think, in my opinion, that $100 went over a lot better than the luncheon. So we've kind of noticed attendance at the luncheon drop off since COVID. So we thought a better benefit for the employees would be, okay, instead of doing the luncheon, budget the $100 gift cards, which we budget at $105.92 because we got to pay a service fee on it. And then the employees end up with $100. So the cost differential there is about 45 grand. So we weave that into your all's budget. So that's tucked in there. And honestly, I think it's a note of change. On the revenue side, other than the taxes, not a lot to report other than kind of what we've already touched on a little bit. Fines and forfeitures, state revenues, kind of all pretty consistent. We can break that down a little bit. And then the change of that transfer from the Carver Heights CRA into the general fund. Those are the highlights. In years past, I've always kind of got into the big relationship between the enterprise funds and the general fund. I'm going to actually save that conversation for Tuesday to drill more down into general fund or electric fund issues. But the core of our business, and I think this is really important to understand, so I kept this one slide. The general fund in the city of Leesburg is a little bit different than other municipal corporations around the state because of our reliance on enterprise transfers. And the lion's share of those enterprise transfers is the electric fund. We have endeavored to really control that to look like our counter municipal corporations. Other municipal corporations function on what I call the big three revenues. Those are state shared revenues, just like we have. Those are the prop ad valorem taxes, just like we have. But where you start to see differential is in non-municipal electric utilities. Just based on your location, those cities tend to be a little bit more urban. And when you get a little bit more urban, your property values go up. So your taxing power in a non-electric urban municipal corporation, you've got a little more taxing power. So you can generate more revenue. State shared revenues are the other big one. And then the final one is, again, back to franchise fees. So you've got franchise fees and utility taxes. So state shared revenue, property taxes, franchise fees slash utility tax. Those three revenue sources are 80% of a municipal corporation's general revenues that doesn't have an electric utility. On our side of the house, we really go almost 40%, 40%, right? 40% taxes, 40% enterprise fund transfers. So those two gears, enterprise transfers and taxes, turns general fund wheel expenses. The thing that I think we need to keep in mind, especially after this past legislative session, is that the enterprise transfer yellow wheel is under attack. So moving forward, we really have to manage that. I think in the past 10 years, our strategy has always been a utility first, and we'll talk about that later when we get into the enterprise funds. But those numbers are becoming more of what a typical municipal corporation looks. So that's a good thing. But we really need to continue that philosophy moving forward. This quote from the state legislatures that really pushed hard on the House bill that significantly changed or proposed to change the dichotomy of how we transfer funds. You know, that bill ultimately died with the creation of a utility authority for GRU. But those legislators from that area left the session with the "we'll be back. We didn't get everything we want." And I paraphrase, but the paraphrase is, we're coming after the munis next year. So next year is January. So I think the two big things that we can do, as I digress here a little bit, is we've got to manage that enterprise transfer issue, and we need to quickly put together the utility authority, which will be on your desk hopefully here in the next couple of meetings, so that we can function and look more like a utility authority, because I think the financial decisions we've made with the charter amendment for the franchise, for the transfer, and other things, those are good stones. But there's a couple more So I'll bring those to your attention shortly. But those are the wheels that make the general fund go. So, as always, we start off the general fund with looking at our ad valorem growth rate. This year, 24% growth, which is, I don't know if this is the biggest year ever for the city of Leesburg, but that's probably biggest by 10% since I've been here. You know, I think when I first started, we saw 3s and 4s and flats, and I think we got 9 and 10 one year, 13 last year, so 24. That's a loud, big, huge urban number. The best thing about that number is it does not include villages growth. So we'll talk about that shortly. So what we see though is 2.5 billion is the total taxable value, but we got to break it down over 4 general fund type enterprises. First is the general fund. That's the granddaddy of them all. We just talked about it with all those services. Last year we were $1.2 billion. That taxable value, mind you too, is different than assessed value. So taxable value is the value that you get your taxes from. Assessed value includes exemptions, like the value of a church, the value of your house with your homestead exemption, yada, yada, yada. So this is the taxable value after exemptions. 1.2 billion last year, this year 1.5 billion. That's actually 31% growth. The GL is the Greater Leesburg CRA. We all refer to it as downtown CRA. They grew from 166 million to 192 million, 15% growth, which is the big grow over CRAs. The Carver Heights CRA grew from 130 million to 146 million, 12%, and the Highway 44127 CRA grew from 526 million to 594 million, 13%. So throw all those numbers into hoppers, total taxable value of 2.5 million, and total across the board of 24. But we've got to break down each of those because these incremental values go into the respective funds, and we'll talk about that on Tuesday. So with the taxable value number for the general fund, now we're just going to drill down and focus on the taxing plan for the general fund. Where we've kind of brought the night to was we increased fire assessment fees like we talked about, and to help folks save money, we've decreased taxes. So the number that we dug up was, how do we kind of balance that transfer for the existing taxpayers? So we came up with a proposal of 3.4 mils, which will generate 6.7 million. I would be remiss if I didn't throw these numbers at you, not to confuse you or entice you to do tax increases or anything like that, but it's important information and you need to know it. The rollback rate is always important to talk about because that's the statutory barometer of how we set our millage rate. The rollback rate is the tax rate that you issue that does not create a tax increase on existing properties. New growth is separate. That comes in on top of that. But we always calculate the rollback based on last year's folks, that they don't get a tax increase. So to generate the same revenue that you did last year, not including new growth, the millage rate would need to be 3.4752. That would actually, if you adopted a budget at this rate, you would actually get another 100 grand. The current rate is 4.0192. If you tax at anything over 3.4752, that is considered a tax increase. So if you use the current rate, you know, we do brag about that sometimes. Well, we use the current millage rate. Well, sometimes we get away with it, sometimes we don't. This would be a we don't get away with it year because there's a significant increase in that value. So that number obviously goes down. So if you tax at 4.0192 mils, you would generate almost $1.2 million more than what we proposed, but that would be a tax increase. If you go to the rollback rate, which is a little bit more than what we programmed, you're about almost $1.1 million more. You with me? Hope I didn't confuse you there. So I want to throw a couple of charts at you to show you what it looks like kind of for the average house in Leesburg. So we figure the average house in Leesburg has a property value of around $225,000. Less a homestead exemption, that's $175,000 of taxable value. That's these numbers. So that house this year, if it had a taxable value of $175,000 at 4.0192 mils, their tax bill was $702, and then they paid an assessment fee of $87. So total taxes to the city of Leesburg on that tax bill, they paid about $790. Next year, if you kept the current millage rate, this number goes up 3%, right? Because the values, all the values of the city went up, but this house we're going to assume is homesteaded, so it can only go up 3%. So the tax bill will go from 703 to 724, right? So there's your tax increase if you use the current millage rate. That's what this is showing. And then if you kept the same fire assessment fee, you'd be up to a total of $890. So almost $100 increase to the taxpayer. So we were like, that's a little bit big, so let's massage the numbers a little bit. So we came up with the proposed number of reducing taxes to that 3.4245 number. Increase 175 by 3%, tax bill is 617. Obviously, you see the decrease. The increase, the net effect is that person's actually down $8. So even though you increase the fire assessment fee, you've given such a substantial decrease in property taxes that this person is paying less money. If you went to the rollback rate, that's about a break even for the taxpayer. So their taxes don't go up quite as much as the proposed rate, significantly less. They still pay a higher assessment fee, and for this person, they would pay $1 more. That slide might be an indication that this $100,000 is something you might want to talk about. Because the magic is that this number at 175. If your house value is below 175, you are more impacted by the increase of the fire assessments, so you can't get that break to the customer or the taxpayer. If your house value is above 175, you bank, because your value is so much more significant than the fire assessment fee that as this number rises, this number doesn't go up as much, so you have a savings there that actually you save money as your value goes up. So the 175 average house really turned out to be the middle ground. So I think the two tax numbers that you really need to think about is the 342 and the 347. So let's come back to that later in the evening and talk about that, because on Monday, we got to get the DR 420 out. And remember, the number that you put in the DR 420, that's as high as you can go. It doesn't mean you're going to go that way. You can go lower, but you can't go higher unless you do your own process, which we don't want to do. But I do think reasonably the current rate is one that we need to abandon. I think the proposed rate and the rollback rate sets us up well for the bulk of those new 3,200 units that we're going to get from the villages. So as I mentioned the villages, let's look at the villages. And I want to go forward to next year just real quick. So the 23% number that we saw this year, really significant. We're hoping next year it will pale in comparison. So how do we know this? We know that the villages is about to build, or is in the process of building 3,200 units a month. They build, I don't know, about 300 units a month or so is what they're doing out there. We know property taxes are in arrears, so everything built by December 31, 2023 is going to get counted for next year. So whatever that magic number is, we're going to guess it's almost the whole thing at 3,200 units. That's going to be on the tax bill for 25. we know that the sale values of those houses are going somewhere between $375,000 to $500,000. So we're being really super conservative and saying $350 less $50,000 a homestead exemption. We got that number from the sales in the paper. So if every house is worth $300,000 and we're going to get 3,200 of them, 3,200 times 300,000 is $960 million, almost $1 billion. So that $1.5 billion in Leesburg this year could be $2.5 billion, or real darn close to it this time next year. So what does that bring you in revenue? So I had to do it. If you use the current millage rate, which we already said we're not going to do, that's 3.8 additional new dollars. If you use the rollback rate, that's 3.3 of new dollars. And if you use the proposed millage rate, that's 3.2 million new dollars. That is 30% increase in ad valorem rate, or maybe 50%, because we're bringing in 6.7. So we can call that 50% round up city manager numbers. So that's going to be a 50% growth in ad valorem. That's humongous. I would like to put forth this concept that we have a year to talk about. I think it will be really important for us to think about how we're spending that before it gets matriculated in, and then in 3 or 4 years we're going to be sitting back saying, where did it all go? That came from Carrie Baker, so I borrowed that line from Carrie. So these would be, and actually this would be the order that I would recommend it to you. And of course, if you guys want to go somewhere else, we'll go somewhere else. But these are the things I think we need to look at. We need to look at reducing the surcharge. The surcharge is the charge, I was going to say tax, but it's the charge that we put on utilities that represents the utility sales tax. So back to the big three, the non-electric municipal corporations. Every municipal corporation in the state of Florida has the power to charge taxes on your utility bill, up to 10%. I'm not going to say every municipal corporation does it, but pretty much every municipal corporation does it. That 10% revenue is huge for a municipal corporation. In the 80s, municipal utilities fought to have a similar charge, not a tax, but a surcharge for customers that were on the system, with the justification that expanding out the infrastructure into unincorporated areas, because we have we have got this rural history of electric utilities, and I don't think that's appreciated. But we've got this rural history, and back in the day when we built the system, Leesburg was rural, and Leesburg was the hub. So our system grew outside our boundaries because Duke wasn't bringing power to your house if you lived out on Silver Lake, but the city of Leesburg was. That's significant. That was the root of the surcharge. So all those customers that are on the city system that are not in a municipal corporation, which would be Leesburg and Fruitland Park, pay the surcharge. So the city of Leesburg, if you live on Main Street and you're in the city of Leesburg and you're on the city's system, you pay your electric fee and you pay a utility tax. If you're in Fruitland Park, you pay your city Leesburg electric bill, you pay a Fruitland Park franchise, and you pay a Fruitland Park utility tax. If you live in unincorporated Lake, but you're on Leesburg Electric, you pay your Leesburg electric bill and you pay your surcharge. Long story short, the surcharge is taxation without representation. The surcharge is one of those things that are going to affect the big yellow wheel of the enterprise transfers. And I think in the future, we need to look at how we wean the general fund off from that. The battle cry of the municipal electric utilities coming from that segment of the state legislature is munis shouldn't be in the business, and it's taxation without representation, and those unincorporated residents don't have a voice in rate making. I don't agree with any of that, except for the taxation without representation, and it's not really taxation, it's a surcharge, but for sake of argument, if it walks like a duck, looks like a duck, right? So that surcharge is something that I think we need to be mindful of in the future. So where are we going to get a bucket of money to get rid of it? The New Villages money.
Duke and FP&L, do they have a surcharge or a tax? They don't have the same one? Okay.
No, they don't.
I mean, I know they pay dividends.
Yeah,
they
so-
say no,
So just remember, let's talk about that a second. You're an investor-owned utility. You're Commissioner Connell, who lives in Arlington Ridge. He's on Duke. So he's a City of Leesburg customer. He pays the Duke electric bill. And then he pays a 6% franchise fee to the City of Leesburg based on his Duke consumption, and he pays a 10% utility tax to the City of Leesburg because that's your right to charge the utility tax. And every city does that. So if you're an investor on utility, you're going to see probably a municipal corporation utility tax and a franchise fee of 6%. Everybody else on the commission, you all are connected to Leesburg Electric. So you pay your electric bill, you pay the utility tax, and that's it. You don't pay a franchise fee because we get that in the transfer. Clear as mud? So fighting the surcharge is an outside limits thing. I think everybody who's sitting up there will agree that when somebody at Silver Lake runs into you at Publix and they cry about their electric bill, I should use a nicer word, when they have concerns about the cost of their electricity, y'all listen to them and you bring that here. And while it's not recognized by the state legislature, I think everybody in this room will agree that that unincorporated resident has influence on their rate making more so than if they had to go to Tallahassee and listen to the Public Service Commission. So here locally, we control it. We saw it back in September. We felt it every day. So I don't agree with that. But these are the arguments that are being thrown at us. And at the end of the day, the doomsday scenario, don't know if it will happen, would be you get to transfer zero. I don't think there will ever come a time where the state forces munis out of the business, because it's not going to happen because of infrastructure reasons and bond reasons and debt issues, that they'll never be able to split that pie. But there could be legislation that says you run your electric utility and every penny has to stay in that utility. That would be the doomsday, in my opinion.
I think I'm clear on this. So the utility companies, they pay a dividend. We do transfers. They pay dividends, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. I thought they did. Okay.
They pay dividends, I think 10 to 12% as allowed by the Public Service Commission, and they report what that dividend is to the Public Service Commission.
Okay. I'm just, the new commissioners, okay. Yeah, everybody understand that.
And now I'm zipping my opinion on a 10% profit, all right? I'm zipping. That's what the Public Service Commission says, so it must be. Okay, so
yeah, okay. I'm good.
New revenue back to the villages. I think we got to look at reducing that. Second thing, I think we need to fight the fight and add additional officers for safety reasons because of our staffing levels are just so low. The chief wants to eventually sometime get up to 90. If you throw $1.1 million at it next year, that's 12. That gets us to 85. So that's a big jump next year. The third thing would be save money for capital improvement projects. And even if we don't have a project, we cut a check, we put it in the capital reserve fund, and we spend it when we bank it. Kind of like what we did with once we sold the fiber system, we came up with projects, and then we spent it resourcefully on major influencing projects. So third. There's a million scenarios there, but I think it's important to get that out. So as we move forward for the next year, everybody's kind of thinking about where we're going, and so when it comes this time next year, it should be just a clean, easy plan. Any questions on that? This chart, real quick, was just the fire assessment fee proposal stuff. So it's 165 for that residential dwelling unit, and then 9 cents. Then all the other categories are per square. We break everything down into commercial, industrial, /warehouse, institutional, church. So it'd be 9 cents per square, 4 cents, 28 cents, and 6 cents per square. Churches are exempt only for their sanctuary. The other exemptions on there is a low to moderate income exemption, which we probably have maybe 30, not even, some 19 or 20. That's reviewed by staff pursuant to the ordinance. A mobile home, empty lot, and the sanctuary exemption. Those are the 3 exemptions. I feel like I'm missing one. That's it. Okay. So that's fire assessment fee. You put all that together, you collect the $2.9 million, which is about a $1.2 million increase. Positions in the general fund, it's a net change of 9. Actually, we threw electric fund in there. So it's 6 in the general fund, customer service, accounting, the police stuff, which you guys have already approved, and the crime scene, you've already approved 4 of the 6. And then in the other funds, 2 more in the electric department and 1 in the building department. Which are in the book?
2 that the stars weren't in the book. Those were adjustments after.
Okay.
So that's why.
Did you guys catch that? The star indicates it's the new one that you haven't seen yet. They weren't in the draft. We added it. Oh.
And the groundsman you want to put back in there. So
Yes.
the draft was just 7, but it's actually 9.
And Brandy changed that.
I did.
So just to look at revenues, we broke them all down there for you, about $33.5 million, up 10%. And there's the breakdown on the pie chart. So that's where you see of the 33, we talk about the big 3 revenues. So if you see this in a municipal corporation that doesn't have a municipal utility, this blue box is where the housing of what I call the big 3 are going to be: the state shared revenues, the ad valorem, the franchise, and the utility taxes. That big blue number would be 85% or 80% of the pie if we didn't have a municipal utility. But with us, so 23 million of the $33 million are coming from, so it's not 40% each, it's about 33%, a third taxes, a third. So that's a big number. What we would like to see is that other source kind of start to get squeezed and the tax numbers start to get a little bigger. General fund cash actually really staying pretty stable, so that's a good thing. We were 13.5 million in October of 16, and we're projected to be about 13.3 million at the end of this fiscal year. So that's a good, healthy, stable number. If you want to cut into that for different projects we've talked about in the past, you want to stay above that reserve requirement, which now hangs out around $6 million based on the GFOA's recommendation of 90 days on cash. You probably have, we've talked about this in the past, maybe bring that down so where we hang out around 9 or 10 million would be a lower number. So that gives you some cash to do different capital improvement projects. Right now, I would say hang on to your cash, let the market come back before you start spending that cash. But so in short, what that means is you ain't rich, but you ain't broke. You're sitting, you're sitting there pretty nice. With that, that's kind of the major overview. I did that in less than 45 minutes, so that's pretty good for me. All right. So now we go as fast as slow as you want. And this is, so those are all the departments. And then we just break down. And now we go through each of the departments in the general fund. And this is kind of where it gets a little bit monotonous. I gave you kind of the 20,000 view of the budget and all the big stuff. And then we drilled down into it. The biggest change that I think if you look at that pops your eyes out are the personnel changes. All those numbers are up. That reflects the modification that you did on the pay reimbursement, which actually was a goal, so we can actually check that one off from May. So City Commission Pretty much the city commission remains the same. The big change there from the 39 to the 83 in operating, that's the employee gift certificates we talked about. Everything else in the city commission budget remains the same. For the, any questions there? We move into the executive, which has two divisions, Lakefront TV. Lakefront TV is pretty much the contractual obligation we have with Facci Bella. We're going back to commission?
The promotional 4810,
Yes.
are we spending some additional revenue to advertise Leesburg or something?
It's the gift cards. It's different stuff. It's little pens and pencils and greeting cards and stuff that we send out on your all's behalf. Paper for your proclamation, that kind of stuff.
Before you go forward, I had just a question on one of the bonds. It was just a rate question. It was on this on page 19. It was one of the electric revenue bonds, and I just saw a rate 564 to 59. I'm guessing you were not allowed to prepay that one.
No, you can only repay them once.
Oh, okay.
So you don't, if you've done it once, you can't go back and do it a second time.
Okay, that explains that one.
Then
Okay.
some of those bonds are really old. They've been there for a long time. They're almost about 30-year bonds. So the old bonds,
I mean, it's not a bad rate, not today. It's just all the other ones are so low. I was just curious what was going
All
on
the
there.
other low ones were refunded.
Right. And I knew we had refunded some. So this one's been, you're saying was redone once before?
assuming it was, it still have that rate, because we've refunded everything that we did.
Okay. Thank you.
So public outreach pretty much remains the same with the Facci Bella contract. And then administration is city manager's office. That pretty much remains the same. And then city clerk pretty much remains the same.
And I just want to point out one thing to the new commissioners. I think I've been on the commission 4.5 years. I'm still learning on budget all the time. But under the Lakefront TV, we have Facci Bella contract services budget 178, and I just want the commissioners to know that is paid to them for all their employees. That's not okay.
All right, that's their total ops.
That's their total. Yeah. Well, they have. Yeah. I just want to point that out. That's been an area of confusion every year in a lot of discussions on Lakefront TV.
The city attorney is also part of that. That's about the same. It's a little bit up, but that's shifting from Macklin to Stone and Gherkin. And then miscellaneous. Miscellaneous is a little bit different. Miscellaneous is where we bank money for vacation buyback for employees. The 205 also represents the delta payment that we do pay to the villages. Even though we said if you increase the fire assessment fee, you're not going to have the delta. You're going to have the delta 1 year because of everything is paid in arrears. So that's that number. Yeah.
72 on the contract.
That's the payment we have to pay to David Jordan to do to collect our fire assessment. So we pay him 2% of the money we collect, yes. And because we're doubling it, it will double.
So that's the miscellaneous. Finance, no major real changes to report in finance. Customer service, the increase in that is obviously the personnel costs go up. The big cost that we have in there is the credit card fees that we have to pay. We're just seeing more and more customers paying with credit cards, and so that's about $160,000 in that operating fee increase. And the capital.
Have we ever looked at, about half the places you go now, if you use a credit card, they charge you more. Do we have any ability to do that? Or not?
Well, we used to charge $5 to use credit card.
Well, people should be used to that now, I think. I mean, that's quite common, but I mean, is that
We
make
made
much
that,
difference?
we made that decision to force people over that.
If that's something the commission wants to look at, we'll go back.
The average is, actually, they're charging us $2.
Okay.
That's what we charge.
Every trans. So what does that add up
For
to?
utility bills, it's $2 fee, and for other things, it's much higher.
$2 times 27,000.
You can see the trend here in the 49XX, so like 305 in 2021, then we went to 350 in 22. Then we totally missed the budget in 23, so that's why we're upping it in 24 to 380. So
What line? What line is that?
it's 49XX on page 80. It says other current charges,
Gotcha.
so it's definitely growing.
Yeah.
Can we look into passing that fee on?
Yeah, you guys want a resolution that changes it, we'll get it to you, maybe not Monday, but the Monday after.
I mean, are we in agreement might be a good idea before we
Is that going
move
to,
right to making a resolution about
Well,
it? All right.
I guess I just want to ask the
Just kind of
question.
a suggestion.
our delinquency is going to go up if we do not, well, I guess they can still,
there's always,
I doubt that.
Okay.
I don't think it would have any effect.
okay, I mean, they can still pay with a credit card, they're just,
Contract that would have to be redone for the people who do the credit card collections for us. So we have to look at that first. See what-
let us do some homework on that, we'll report back to you.
Just a thought. I mean,
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
And then the procurement division is in finance and warehouse. Those departments really stay pretty much flat. When we jump over to human resources, really nothing significant to report on human resources. IT, again, we remain consistently flat. The 150, that's the security number, right?
No, that's in the capital projects fund. This is just copiers and
Okay,
servers and all.
the 150 in capital, it's just copiers, computers, and stuff that we replace every year. That's about kind of the going cost of replacing all your computers and different stuff every year. You can see the numbers pretty consistent. Really nothing. The only, I will bring this to your attention. We did program security improvements for City Hall, the MOC building next door, and the Resource Center for next year to the tune of $150 grand. We'll talk about that in capital projects. That'll be on Tuesday. GIS, nothing significant to report there. Then we move into the police. The police department really remains pretty consistent other than the pay increases. Pretty much most of everything in the police department is personnel. Fines and forfeitures, that's kind of rolling as they capture bad stuff. And then it goes into their forfeiture fund. And the police education fund operates the same way, so nothing really significant to report in police. Police impact fees, we've got $1 million sitting there. We should start seeing that number go up as Villages comes in and some of the other new housing on South 27 and throughout Leesburg comes in. Fire, again, nothing major to report here. Most of the increases associated with personnel, and then the impact fees, it works pretty much the same with fire as it does with police. Public works, the street maintenance, about the same. The facilities, the only deviation here is this 100. Is this where we put in the extra money for Venetian Center?
No, it's in recreation.
That's in rec. Okay. What's that difference? That 100 grand.
100 grand. Looks like they were going to use someone's, insurance was 30 of it. Insurance, and they had an athletic field light contract to get somebody out there on the lights. That was about 30,000, so.
And the capital.
And the capital is HVAC and.
The annual elevator and HVAC repair stash. I know I should use nicer words. I'm just being honest. There's no fluff in the budget. It's a stash. The grounds, so no, that's still not here either, but that's relatively the same. Admin, community development is planning and zoning. The decrease there is we don't have money put away for the comp plan, which we're working on. So that should be coming back to you.
So, operating expenses in the
They dropped from 174 to 80.
100 this year, then it goes down to 1,500. What that?
The comp plan.
The comp plan, that
100.
was what the difference is. We paid for it last year.
So we don't have to budget.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Housing, pretty much the same. And library. The big change in there is utility increase costs for the library.
85,000.
Yeah, so the library, the big utility change,
Yep.
that's air conditioning.
Is it a new unit?
This is recreation. This is the change here. That's the change on operating, where you see more stuff going, a little more maintenance monies. The pool, the marina. We are proposing a 3% increase on the slips for marina to keep pace with everybody else. Really nothing else to report there. We still have the marina project on board, and we still have the Susan Street project on board. Probably be back to you in the next 45 to 60 days with some concepts to start beating that up and getting that out to construction. And that's it. Questions?
I had a question I missed earlier. Something I'd marked. It's on page 41. It's in the general fund. It's a revenue number. Venetian Center fees are, well, they're bouncing around. Okay, I thought the 105 was proposed. I see it's back up to 150. I was just wondering why it was down. We didn't reduce my question. We didn't reduce the fees or anything on it. Okay, that's my question right there.
Being conservative.
Okay. And then on the park facility fees were down. Okay, I was just curious why it was down. My question was, did we go reduce the fees, which I didn't think we should not be doing. Okay.
No.
Okay, I'm good.
Assuming when I looked at 23, it wasn't trending to go much above that, but I tend to go low, honestly, so I just might have gone too.
Yeah, no, I'm fine. You can see that was my concern. I don't recall cutting fees on it. I always thought they were kind of low anyway.
What was the increase at the library? Did you say a new system?
Utilities.
Utilities, just, okay.
Bills, yeah, the utility bill.
I had a question on page 41. The marina operating lease, what is that?
So they have, isn't it, what's the new bills?
Is that Holiday Marine? Holiday Marine?
Yes.
Holiday, I'm sorry.
Is that what that
Yes,
is?
they
Okay,
pay that, yeah.
I just want a clarification.
Yeah, I would just comment, growth is good, and it's amazing, the 24% increase in taxable value. But I also see expenses going up. We always like to talk about the growth, and I believe growth pays for itself. I just want to point out, everything we went through today was up on the expense side. So,
So on that note,
that's not a criticism. I'm just pointing
No,
out.
on that
we're so
note-
proud of our revenue, but we are, as we grow, expenses are growing.
So on that note, I just bring this slide back to your attention. Because we're now at the time to talk about that a little bit. I think we've provided you with a very good budget. I think the change in taxing mechanisms is a significant change that I think benefits the city for years to come. It makes us extremely competitive, and we're still providing quality general services for our community. So this is the time of the program where let's talk about the tax rate stuff so that we know how to address this come Monday. If you want to have a little more discussion on an extra $100,000, you need to set the DR 420 at 3.4752. That gives you $100,000. At that rate, you still have, even with increasing the fire assessment fee, the average resident is still not going to see a significant increase in their taxes. And remember, it's that 175. That's the house. That's the, above that, you start.
Where did you get that number? Is that the Leesburg average, or is that like out of the magazine?
Leesburg averages.
Yeah. because I just wonder what percentage of our residents are in
The 170.
less than that,
Sure.
that are going to be impacted a little bit by the fire.
I don't,
Yeah, I
I
don't know
don't
the
have,
answer.
don't know the answer to that. I think it's a minority. I don't know how low below 50%. But I think that 175 is probably a pretty good number.
I'll compliment you and staff on. I think it's a great budget. That's a big decrease in the millage rate, and it just jumps out at you. But I guess that's probably where I was going with my lead in on the expenses. I'd probably lean toward the rollback rate, and I don't take that lightly. But I mean, that's a big decrease, and
remember,
and we can
Maybe you can talk us into the,
because the last thing I want to do is have to take it up. I don't.
if we decide Monday.
Yeah.
No, I meant like the next year.
No,
something
yeah,
like
I
that.
think.
Yeah,
yeah,
they brought it down, then a year or two later they took it back
probably going
up.
with your rollback rate is a good policy for the trim notice, and it gives you about
always go down.
It gives you 8 weeks to kick it around.
Right.
So if that's the pleasure of the commission, we will modify the DR 420 to the rollback number 3.4752.
Yeah, sounds good.
With hopes that we can make it even better.
And I'll qualify my comment on supporting the rollback rate is also it's my uneasiness over the future of the electric utility transfers. The fact that we're going to be attacked every year, we're going to have to fight that every year, FMPA and the municipal electric companies, and I just worry about that. So I just don't want to get too aggressive. We could lose that money, any year, and that would hurt. So this is a good time to finish some of the projects we're doing and continue everything while still, I think, being very fair to the residents of Leesburg. But no, thank you. I think y'all did a great job. It's a great recommendation.
So is the rollback rate, if I understand it correctly, once you add the additional fire assessment fee, the additional taxes will be $1 per year, is what you're saying?
Yes.
So would you propose it'd be $8 a year savings?
Yes. Based on a value of 175. And if your value is higher than that, you're going to do better. If your value is lower than that, you're going to do a little higher. Excuse me. So barring any other questions, that was our presentation on the general fund. We'll see you Monday night, and then Tuesday we'll do the special revenues and electric fund.
2.5.
Thank you.
Motion to adjourn?
Got a second?
Second.
We're adjourned.